So I've been writing code professionally for almost a decade at this point. And I've received a question from a viewer asking if it's still worth learning how to code, even with AI and the threat of AI taking all the jobs. Maybe I can answer that by showing you what AI can do right now. I'm using this tool called V0 that can create a web application based on natural human language prompts. I'm asking it to create me a fitness tracker application. You can see it writing the code for me based on my prompt. And I can get an application in just a few minutes. So for those who want to learn to code to eventually become a software engineer, are you The entire industry and all the news media are basically saying, yes, you are. But my answer is no, absolutely not. And I'll give you a few reasons why. Right now, we can look at this application and just click around. It looks nice, but it's not an actual working application, since it's only the UI or the user interface, and it's not actually hooked into anything. You would need some kind of back end to store and retrieve the data if you want to make it useful rather than just looking pretty. But let's imagine this application does actually have a back end and it can retrieve and display the data. It's only a handful of pages. Imagine an app that you might use every day for shopping, for work, or study, like Costco, LinkedIn, or Canva. Those apps aren't just 6 pages. They have a bunch of stuff you can do for their users, like creating digital media, sending messages, or allowing you to shop for your groceries. And you can bet under the hood, it's probably hundreds to thousands of files and hundreds of thousands to millions of lines of code. On top of that, there's likely other technical but not necessarily coding related things like product development, user experience design, and DevOps. And coding is only just one part of creating software. Given all of this complexity, do you really think coding will become obsolete because of AI? There was also a recent Reddit post about someone creating an application that became so big that Claude, which is an AI, or rather a large language model similar to ChatGPT, it couldn't understand it anymore. And we're only talking about 30 files here. And why is that? When you hear the word token being used with AI, the word token basically means how many words, like the count of the word, that is able to understand in its context window. So if it's 5 tokens, it probably means 5 words. And we're talking the combined total of the words you input and the words that it outputs. With the current ChatGPT model, it has a limit of 1,192 tokens, and with the paid version, it has about like 32,000 tokens. So if I'm using the free version and a file in my hypothetical codebase is over 10,000 tokens, 10,000 words, it might straight up just fail to analyze part of the code or just make stuff up, which is also referred to as hallucinations. And that's really just one example of the limitations of AI at this time. Will it get to a point where LLMs can write enterprise software and render developers obsolete? I don't know. It's possible we're in the very early stages of AI and how it can be useful to us. I mean, humans discovered nuclear fusion in the 1930s, but the concept of a fusion reactor is still only science fiction at this time. Or for another example, Alexander Graham Bell invented the phone in 1876, but widespread adoption took 30 to 40 years depending on who you ask. It took time for people to obtain the technology and to adapt it to their lives. If this was a graph of the growth and the adoption of the telephone and how it affects people's lives and industry, no one actually knows where AI is on a similar graph. We could be right here or right here. Change doesn't happen overnight, and we don't know how far along AI is at this time, how much it has left to grow, and if or when it disrupts business like everyone is expecting or hoping that it would. If I'm being honest, I think it's mostly hype or in some cases blatant lies. And feel free to agree or disagree with me in the comments. Let me know why. The marketing is very optimistic for AI, but real-world performance doesn't really meet the hype. And I think AI is kind of a misnomer because it's not really intelligent. It's just a really, really good autocomplete. That's why I prefer to call them LLMs instead, which stands for large language models, because it reflects what it actually is at this time. LLMs learn to understand the language by analyzing a crap ton of text. Like, you know, all the stuff that we have on the internet. It's kind of why everyone is suing all of these AI companies, because their models were using content that they didn't have permission to use as training material. LLMs are really good at pattern recognition and predicting what the next word or token might be based on a given context. But we know that LLMs struggle with creating real, scalable, and complex systems and applications. There was also a study done by a company called GitClear. It's a dev tool that companies use to analyze code. All the code and the files are housed in a project file called a repository, or a repo for short. And most devs use a tool called Git that tracks the changes that are made in a repo. And if need be, it also makes it easier to revert the changes made as well. So the study done by this company analyzed over 153 million lines of code in over 3,400 repos from 2020 to 2023. They found that there was a significant increase of nearly 40% year over year in code churn. They define code churn as having code added to a repo that is then changed relatively quickly within about a 2-week time frame. So you can infer, given the higher increase in code churn, that the quality of the code that was so quickly produced by AI just wasn't very good. And this segues nicely into the fact that you need to know how to code to determine if it's any good, right? AI is a tool in a developer's tool belt, not a replacement. I have been writing some kind of code back when the big framework war of the day was jQuery versus MooTools. Does anybody remember MooTools? I actually developed a bit of WordPress in my time, and to be honest, back in those days, people thought content management systems, CMSs, like WordPress, Wix, or Squarespace, would be replacing coding and engineers. For WordPress in particular, users could install plugins and themes that made customizing it much easier for non-technical end users, and oftentimes they didn't need to know any coding at all. So with these tools, why bother paying a developer when it's so easy to create your own site? It became way more accessible for non-technical people to create and grow a web presence or a blog. As these people grew their businesses, so did the demand for more custom, more technical work when those sites grew large enough to be able to afford and require that type of customization. There were third-party industries of sorts that cropped up to support the demands from these people. And in turn, developers ended up specializing in building plugins or providing hosting services, or just straight up becoming a freelancer, specializing in developing WordPress sites and plugins. I was actually one of them. So when I say that LLMs are a tool, I definitely mean it. Technology tends to replace these low-skilled jobs or tasks while creating opportunities for higher-skilled people. And that means learning to code is more relevant than ever. There's still demand for developers. Yes, I can agree that AI and LLMs are changing the industry, but it's not making coding or software engineers obsolete. Everyone and their mom often cites the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I'm gonna do it too. The BLS projects that the overall employment of software developers, QA analysts, and testers is projected to grow 17% from 2023 to 2033, which is much faster than the average for all occupations as a whole. If you want another reason why you should learn to code, there's also info about the average and median pay of software engineers. The profession does pay pretty dang well, with a very high ceiling. And even the low-end dev jobs, like working for nonprofits, they also pay pretty well compared to average salary in the US. And I'll link everything in the description if you want to poke around with the BLS pages while it still exists. So for a bit of a recap, there is an expectation that demand will grow, and I agree that part of it will be driven by AI. It's similar to those easy-to-use content management systems like WordPress. AI just makes it easier for people to create their product. There are tools like V0, which I demonstrated earlier in this video, that can write basic applications based on natural human language prompts. And people will create whole applications and start their companies from these tools. Some already have. But we know that once it gets to a certain size of complexity, when they need to scale to meet the demands for their customers, they're going to need these people to build a custom and more robust solution for them, or to go in and fix the slop that the AI created. But overall, we don't know what the industry will look like or what kind of support or demand will be needed. There's a quote I like to think about by the philosopher Lucius Annaeus Seneca, who said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." I really love that quote because it basically says we can make our own luck by being prepared. But my recommendation of how you can make your own luck is to learn the foundations of programming, your computer science fundamentals, the data structures and algorithm, learn whatever framework you need to learn the tools, and get good at it. If you're a total newbie who's just starting out, my best advice to you is do not let AI write the code for you. You could let ChatGPT or Claude be your tutor, where you could ask it all sorts of questions without making you feel dumb for asking it. Because back in my day, there was this thing called Stack Overflow where people would ask for help in some coding related thing. And half the time, people who knew those answers would make you feel bad for asking questions and downvote you, or they'd actually respond and get some internet points. You don't have to do that anymore. With AI, you can ask for examples on how to write specific code. You could ask it to suggest improvements on your code or be an extra set of eyes if you need help debugging. But overall, you should be the one with your hands on the keyboard writing the code. I recognize that I might be a bit biased in this advice because I learned how to code when ChatGPT was not a thing. I remember spending hours stuck on a problem. I was so frustrated, I was literally in tears at the end of the day. Yes, I cried over codes. My point is, you can't really substitute learning those lessons if you were to have a robot write all that code for you. And this same advice also applies to doing tutorial. Tutorials can feel safe and kind of trick you into thinking that you're writing your own code, but you're really not. You're just copying whatever's on the screen. And that's how you could get stuck in this thing called tutorial hell, where you just keep doing tutorials over and over again. Don't get me wrong, it's fine to do a few of them to get the gist of some things, but ultimately you need to write your own code. I actually found that solving small problems in Code Wars was what broke me out of tutorial hell. And once you've gotten to the point of knowing how to code, I'm sorry to say, but it's not gonna be enough. You don't wanna be a code monkey, because that's what the LLMs are. You wanna be a problem solver. So learn how to do that by building projects and solving your own problems. It doesn't even have to be a business problem. There's this time I built a personal villagerpedia for Animal Crossing to track all the villager portraits I was collecting. Yeah, I know, I'm weird. Or for a boring example, when I bought my first house, I wanted to track all the maintenance documentation, the contact information, and scheduling in some sort of automated calendaring system. Yeah, I know, it could have been a spreadsheet with Google Calendars, but it's a problem I was solving for myself. I didn't have to do user research because I was the user. I was able to learn about architecture and integrations, and it was just fun to work on. And when you're at the point where you could solve your own problems, only then is when I'd actually recommend using tools like Copilot or Codium to help with the AI pair programming. If you can sense a theme with my recommendations, it's that you don't let AI dictate the situation, but you are the one using it as a tool to enhance what you already know. And if you're at the stage, learn how to optimize your prompts, which I like to call prompt engineering. Learn how to manage your context and know the limitations of AI to be able to use it effectively. AI is definitely changing how we code and how we learn to code, but it won't make this skill obsolete. I'm certain that coding will only become more valuable in the future, and those who can leverage AI will be more productive and gain that competitive advantage. But just remember that software engineers work with people to make software or products for people. You want to be a problem solver, not just a coder. Those who can solve those people problems, as well as the architectural problems that AI can't solve, will be in the best position to succeed in the future. With its help, of course. Now, if you made it this far, you either really enjoy the video, you learned something, or you just love torturing yourself with my ramblings. Either way, I'd really appreciate it if you can hit the like and subscribe. It would really help my channel.